Today I'm going to tell you the whole story of Cuca, where she came from, how she got this alligator form, and also some stories and accounts about her. Let's go. Cuca is one of the most famous characters in Brazilian folklore, becoming very popular because of Monteiro Lobato. Not really because of the book itself, actually, but because of the TV adaptation they made, which they still make to this day. Believe it or not, where she appears in her alligator form. However, originally Cuca didn't have this form. Actually, she would be a witch, or to be honest, more exactly, right, Câmara Cascudo, who is the guy I'm going to use as a source here in the video, said that in fact Cuca would be a ghostly being. Many people described her as being a witch, and she is part of that class of beings that Brazilians call bicho papão, the boogeyman. In other words, she hunted children, especially at night. And according to descriptions people gave of Cuca, she would be an extremely old, wrinkled, very thin witch who attacked children who were disobedient during the day, making noise, causing trouble, that kind of thing. In fact, this description of Cuca looking like a witch and being active at night really reminded me of Pisadera, who has a very similar description, old, wrinkled, that kind of thing. According to the legend's descriptions, very similar to Pennywise, Cuca would sleep every 7 years, and she has a scream that can be heard from very far away, about 10 leagues away. And she has a song that isn't sung that much nowadays, but in the past, you know, when a mother was putting her child to sleep, or the father too, they would always sing Cuca's little song, right? Sleep, baby, or Cuca will come get you. Mommy went to the fields and Daddy. There's also a continuation I didn't know. Come down, little cat, from the rooftop to see if the boy beside me sleeps peacefully. And this song has variations, depending on the region of Brazil where the legend takes place, right? For example, in Minas, according to Câmara Cascudo, it would be, go away, Coca, from the rooftop, let the boy sleep peacefully. But there are many, many variations. In fact, if you know a different version of this Cuca song, leave it in the comments because I'll find it very interesting. They even say, right, that Cuca can hunt. Those who don't like the video, don't subscribe to the channel and don't share it either. So go ahead and do that now. Remember, if you'd like to support me further, you can become a channel member for less than 5 rays. It really helps me keep things going here. And you'll get early access to videos and also exclusive videos like the ones you see on the screen. Plus, of course, your name will be immortalized here in the video. And another way you can help me is by buying something that's showing up here on the screen. Just click on the product there. For example, I'll leave the PlayStation 5 here at a good price, but I don't know how long this promotion will last, so check it out using the link in the pinned comment. Just by clicking on them, you'll already be helping me a lot. And as you saw in the song from Minas, Cuca is called Coca. And it's not an ad or a soft drink, but actually one of the many variations of the name Cuca. It can also be called Coco, which is the same name as Crash Bandicoot's sister, a game I really like and actually miss a lot. They should release new games. Okay, but where did the name Cuca come from? Actually, we're not sure about the origin of the name, but there are several theories. The first theory goes back to Portugal, where they call pumpkins coca, especially those you've probably seen in a lot of movies, on Halloween, where people carve the pumpkin and make eyes, a nose, and a mouth. In Portugal, that's called coca. Then they would take this pumpkin and put a light inside to make it look more macabre and scare people. But for this pumpkin called Coca to become the Coca, the boogeyman, it was also connected to another figure, one that usually appeared in Corpus Christi processions. And in these processions, during these walks, there was, or still is usually someone wearing a hood, there calling themselves Coca. But on top of that, even in Portugal, Coca was also connected to St. George's dragon. You remember, right? That famous story where St. George killed the dragon. Well, that dragon would be called Coca. There's even the Coca de Monção festival. And it's not what you're thinking, okay? It's not people sniffing something there. No. But actually, it's an event where there's kind of a play of St. George facing Santa Coca, which in this case is the dragon that St. George kills. But now, going more into the meaning of the name, Coca can come from coco, which can mean head, but also has a more demonic meaning. And then it makes more sense with the legend of the Coca. In that sense, Coco would come from kakos, which means something more or less like wicked, evil, demonic, brutal, or violent. And interestingly, in Greek mythology, there's the story of Kakos, right? Who would be the son of Hephaestus, who was killed by Hercules? While Hercules was on his way back home there, After taking Gerion's cattle, he ends up killing Cacos. Or it could also come from Angola, where Cuca means grandfather or grandmother, which fits Coca's original appearance, right? Like an old witch. There's also the word in Tupi that means something like a gulp, something you drink all at once, or it's also related to an owl. And just out of curiosity, still talking about Angola, there's the legend of the Negro Velho from Minas Gerais, which is very similar to the legend of Coca, because he also chases naughty children who didn't behave during the day. And the word Coca still appears in front of the names of other legends, mainly Portuguese ones. For example, Coca Loba, which would be like the Cabra Cabriola, which is from Brazil. It also lurks around houses and children's rooms, waiting to kidnap them. Well, that dragon that fights St. George, and also that hooded being that used to appear in processions. It probably ended up mixing with the legend of Coca Loba, and also a bit with the Angolan legend of Coco, which would be a demonic being. It took the Tupi name that has connections with owls, thus having ties to the night. Then it became Cuca the witch, which wasn't an alligator yet. Still, it was effective for parents trying to make their kids behave, saying that if they didn't stay quiet, they would probably be taken by the Coca during the night. The old witch. Alright, the legend of the Cuca already existed in Brazil, but in this case, she usually appeared wearing a worn-out gray cloak. Then Monteiro Lobato came along, who decided to put some folklore characters in a book of his called Sachi. In this book, the character named Pedrinho ends up meeting Sachi, and together with him, they go through the forest unraveling various mysteries. And among these mysteries, there are several Brazilian legends. According to this book, Coca would live in a cave deep in the Tucanos' thicket. She sleeps every 7 years and can also turn Narizinha into stone. And Sachi ends up discovering this and tells Pedrinho, who then remembers the songs he used to hear when he was a child. And even the narrator says that he ended up trembling when he remembered the lullabies that talked about Cuca. And Sachi also ends up saying at one point that Coca is the queen of ugly things, which is very similar to the meaning of the original Coca. Monteiro Lobato, at least in the beginning and in his conception, really respects the original Coca. He even says that Cuca rests in the minds of children who are disturbed when they hear her lullaby. However, when it comes to the physical characterization of Coca, there are two different descriptions. The first description of our dear Coquinha happens when Pedrinho and Saci go disguised to the witch's cave so that they won't be noticed by her. And at that moment, Coca is described as a being that, quote, had the face of an alligator and claws on her fingers like hawks. As for her age, she must have been over 3,000 years old. She was as old as time, end quote. Another description is given by Narizinho, who adds some new information about this creature. And I quote, "It was like this. I was with Emilia under the jabuticaba tree. Suddenly, an old, very old and wrinkled woman came up to me with a very ugly smile on her face." Well, suddenly, an old, very old and wrinkled woman came up to me with a very ugly smile on her face, end quote. This second description clearly shows that the witch is extremely powerful and that she can change her shape as she wishes. She can, of course, take on the famous alligator form, but also the form of an old woman. It depends on the situation, what's needed, and what she wants to do. She does this in the TV series too, which is quite common. Well, it's easy to see that the Cuca portrayed by Monteiro Lobato is quite different from the one described in the legends, especially by Camera Cascudo. By showing the Coca in O Sachi, Lobato ends up rediscovering, and at the same time, reinventing this figure from national folklore. Curiously, apparently, he even went to Portugal and took that idea of the dragon and the Coca they have there, and he brought it here, giving it the form of an alligator. More than Monteiro Lobato's book, the idea of Cuca as an alligator actually came from the Sítio do Pica-Pau Amarelo TV series. Since in those adaptations, I don't even remember any scenes where the Coca appears as a witch or anything like that. I only remember her as an alligator. In those adaptations, Coca is always a villain and appears much more often than in the original work. And it's also important to say that from the moment Monteiro Lobato's work became popular, there was a lot of confusion in people's minds, since they couldn't separate the creature from popular stories from the character created by Monteiro Lobato. But even though Monteiro Lobato probably got inspired by the legend of the Coca from Portugal, It's also possible that he got some ideas from somewhere else. So in this way, the Cuca, as a crocodile, could come from another character, from another mythology, which in this case is Egyptian mythology. The description of the Cuca as having the body of an alligator and the claws of a hawk is a look that really stands out and makes people who pay more attention, who study more mythology, remember some other creatures and some other really ancient characters. For example, the Sphinx, which is present in both Greek and Egyptian mythology, or even gods that existed in Egypt and Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. This happens because those gods and creatures were hybrids, right? Or maybe if you want to stretch it a bit, chimeras. In other words, they mixed parts of other creatures or even humans, creating new beings. Cuca follows this same pattern, right? She has human behaviors like standing upright, talking. But she also has animal features like the back of an alligator and claws. And because of this mix, many people say and believe that Cuca is not a recent invention. Her traits closely resemble and are strongly linked to figures from the distant past, like the Egyptian gods Ra and Anubis, or gods from other more ancient cultures. Following that line of thought, there are studies that propose a direct relationship between Cuca and an Egyptian goddess, Taweret, or Tawere, who was a protective deity of the home and pregnant women, helping with childbirth and taking care of small children. In other words, almost the opposite of Cuca, right? And unlike Cuca, who was usually kind of stressed out, Taweret was highly adored for being very calm and gentle, and her frightening appearance was only meant to scare away evil spirits that could threaten families. Although her appearance was so ugly that she could probably scare the families themselves. When we compare these two creatures, it might even seem like they're very different at first. The goddess Taweret was depicted with the head of a hippopotamus, the arms and legs of a lion, the tail of a crocodile, and human breasts. However, it's quite possible that Monteiro Lobato simplified these features to create Cuca. Since there are no lions or hippopotamuses in Brazil, he would have chosen to focus only on the alligator aspect, so that the character would fit much better with Brazil's natural environment without feeling so out of place. Even though their appearance is quite different, they share a common essence that is based on the idea of a mother. According to psychology, the symbol of the mother has two sides. The first is the kind side, which takes care, feeds, and helps to grow, as was the case with the goddess Taweret. The second is the terrible side, which is dark and frightening, represented by Cuca. While Taweret is the mother who protects her child, Cuca represents the one who corrects the child, who also tries to prevent their growth, thus becoming an obstacle they need to face in order to mature. That's why, in the stories, characters like Pedrinho need to defeat Cuca to become heroes. In the end, even though they come from different cultures and times, the Egyptian goddess and the Brazilian witch are two ways of representing those deep feelings of protection and fear that surround the process of growing up. Hey, good afternoon, sir. What's your name? Well, I'd rather not say my name, no, that's fine, but why did you come to see me? It's because the men from the farm over there, you know, that big farm, said that you're looking for some stories about strange creatures that people see around here. Yeah, actually, I'm collecting some stories. Do you have any interesting ones to tell me? Oh, I do. Some time ago, some things happened to me that still give me chills to this day. I'll try my best to explain, but I want to apologize. I'm not great at talking since I didn't have much schooling. No worries, I understand everything you're saying. As I mentioned, I work on that farm with Mr. Juventino and Mr. Luciano. Occasionally, we're alone there, and I sometimes sneak out to visit my friends here. I usually do this late at night because it's more peaceful and quiet then. But some time ago when that weird thing happened to me, Juventino told me to be careful because it was Lent, you know, and there were a lot of strange creatures wandering around. Weird creatures. You mean like werewolves and that kind of thing, right? Yeah, werewolves, spirits, witches, all those bad things. Well, some time ago I said, I'm going to take a little break here. It's late at night. I've finished all my stuff. I'm going to Tavim's boat to have a drink with my friends. It doesn't even matter what Juventino has to say to me because that crazy guy just talks nonsense. So I started walking past the gate, and as you can see, there are a bunch of cornfields there. Some beautiful corn. It's a cornfield. And now passing through there is easy, right? But at night, you can't see a hand in front of your face. So I always walked with my little lantern to light up everything in front of me. And you were never afraid to take that path, were you? No, I never had any problems. No, I never had any trouble with anyone around here, and I always believe in Jesus. But that night I'm telling you about, I almost crapped my pants. I was making my way through the cornfield to have a little drink here, when suddenly I looked to the side and noticed a strange light in the middle of the corn. Then I said, that's it. It must be Juventino trying to mess with me. Just let that rascal come. So I thought, I'll get him first. I went over there, entered the middle of the cornfield, and followed that strange light, thinking it was Juventino. But when I got there, I saw something really weird. I said, telling you this right now, just remembering it still gives me chills. At first I thought it was an animal there, but it looked more like an old woman. An old woman in a hood, all dressed in black, and there was a strange light around her. She was really skinny, I'm telling you, sir. She looked like a stick. That moment scared me so much that I ran out of there and went back to talk to Juventino. Juventino said I was lucky, met Cuca, and survived only because I'm not a kid anymore.